Good morning, and welcome to All Souls Unitarian Universalist Congregation of New London. You've just enjoyed the percussion of our guest musician and UU worship leader, Meyer, who comes to us from Massachusetts and has been here before to our delight, where he's the Director of Community Life for Sanctuary Boston. It's so good to have you with us, Matt. Thanks for making the journey. I'm Caitlin O'Brien, Associate Minister, and also with us today, our Bill Groth, our accompanist, and Jesse Edwards, who handles all things audio, visual, technological, and so many volunteers who make being together in this way possible. The land where we live and work and worship is the land of the Nahantic and Mohegan people. We honor them as we begin. We enter into this worship experience bewildered and disgusted that President Putin of Russia has launched an unprovoked invasion of Ukraine, with the whole world watching and the whole world warning against it. We may feel a sense of helplessness as the bombs fly and innocent people are traumatized, displaced, or killed. And for what? For what? For power and territory. There's a way in which the whole world is on edge and holding its breath. This is grave. In this hour, I invite you to exhale and find here nourishment for your spirit and a sense of community, which is, of course, the antidote to division and harm-doing. Let's provide to one another the fuel we will need in the days to come. Welcome to All Souls, where all souls are welcome. You are joyfully called to worship.
Our opening hymn this morning is called Blessed Motion, written by Annie Zylstra. It was written when she was inspired by the words of Martin Prechtel, who spoke of what it was like to have survived an earthquake in Guatemala. Prechtel spoke of what it was like to see the ground beneath his feet, that which had always been so permanent and so reliable and so solid, suddenly rise up in motion. And he said that the myth of believing in solid ground is a myth believed by those that live on the earth rather than living as a part of it. I know for about 2 years now, I have been constantly searching for a sense of grounding, while it feels like the ground beneath me is constantly shifting. If that's been true for you as well, I invite you into the spirit of this song, to be in motion with the earth and to be in movement together. There's a high part that's call and response, and then a low part. You can sing along with whatever part you like best or fits best for you, or go ahead and make up your own to sing along to. For those of you joining us at home, this is a great chance to practice some new harmonies you might not have been so bold to try if others could hear you. I believed in solid ground until I saw the earth in motion, in the winds of steady change, and the ever-rolling ocean. All moves on in perfect motion. All is change and ever rolling ocean. All moves. We'll do that low part 2 more times. In perfect motion. All is change and ever rolling ocean. All moves on all is change and ever rolling ocean. I believed in solid ground until I saw the earth in motion, in the winds of steady change and the ever rolling ocean. I believe in solid ground until I saw the earth in motion, the wind of steady change and the ever rolling ocean. I believe in solid ground until I saw the earth in motion, in the wind of steady change and the ever rolling ocean. I believe in solid ground until I saw the earth in motion, in the wind of steady change and the ever rolling ocean. I believed in solid ground until I saw the earth in motion, in the winds of steady change and the ever rolling ocean. I believed in solid ground until I saw the earth in motion.
Amen. So beautiful. This is the time in our service when we take a moment to look around and greet one another and offer a word of peace. I invite the souls in Unity Hall to turn toward Jesse and greet our souls with us online. And whether through the online chat, a wave here in Unity Hall, or just goodwill radiating from your heart, let us offer one another peace. Thank you. As Matt lights our chalice, please speak with me the words in our order of worship. Oh, sing a new song to the eternal. Shout praise, all earth. Break into music and song. Praise the eternal with the lyre and song. Let the sea and all within it thunder praise. The world and its inhabitants, let rivers clap their hands. Let mountains sing in chorus. Oh, sing a new song to the eternal. And yes, this morning, we light our peace candle for the people of Ukraine and for the international alliances that will be tested by the plight of the people of Ukraine. All of the relationship building and shared values clarification that has taken place over decades among members of NATO, the United Nations, and the like, comes down to moments like these. What are we for? What will we do? I'm reminded of something that apparently the Secretary of State, Seward, apparently said to President Lincoln during our Civil War. He said there was always just enough virtue in this republic to save it. Sometimes none to spare, but still enough to meet the emergency. For the global community, may this be so. Let us say amen. Amen. We'd like to bring in the children and youth to hear Matt's story for all ages this morning. This is a story that was published by Matt last year, and it speaks to the collaboration that peace requires of all of us. Come on in.
Well, this is a story called Desmond Gets Free. Now, Desmond the mouse lived in the most beautiful meadow in all the land. Every morning, Desmond would awake with the sunrise and spend the whole day playing in that meadow. And every evening, he would go to sleep in the middle of that meadow under the beautiful starry night. One night, though, Desmond awoke to find that it was still dark out. So he tried to roll over, get more comfortable, and go back to sleep, but something wasn't right. He could barely move, and his tail was throbbing with pain. Reaching behind him, he felt that there was some sort of huge rock or boulder seemed to have fallen just on his tail in the middle of the meadow. He tried pushing as hard as he could on this boulder, and he tried tugging on his tail with all of his might. And he tried pushing and tugging and tugging and pushing, but it was no use. He was stuck. When he was just about out of breath, though, he heard another animal passing by through the meadow. He looked and saw that it was a giraffe. Good news, he thought. He called out, "Oh, giraffe, it seems that some sort of boulder has landed just on my tail in the middle of the meadow. If you could use your powerful big legs to push it just a few inches in the other direction, I could get free." Well, the giraffe laughed at Desmond the way giraffes do. "You silly mouse," he said. "That's no boulder that's fallen on your tail. That is an elephant that's fallen asleep on your tail." Well, that might be better, I think, thought Desmond. If you could just gently wake him up and ask him to roll over even just a few inches in the other direction, I could get free. "I don't know about that," said the giraffe. "Surely you know what they say about letting sleeping elephants lie. I find it's best not to get involved in other animals' business. I find it's best to remain neutral in times like this." "Well," said Desmond, "I do not appreciate your neutrality." The giraffe wandered off, leaving Desmond alone. So he tried calling out to wake the elephant, but his little mouse voice was just too far away from those giant elephant ears at the way other end of that giant elephant body. Again, he tried pushing with all of his strength, and he tried tugging his tail with all of his might, and he tried shouting and pushing and tugging and tugging and pushing and shouting over and over again till he had just about given up when he heard another animal pass by. This time it was a gazelle, and he called out. He said, if you could just gently wake this elephant and ask it to roll over even just a few inches in the other direction, I could go free. I don't know about that, said the gazelle. Surely you know what they say about letting sleeping elephants lie. I find it's best not to get involved in other animals' business. I find it's best to remain neutral in times like this. The gazelle wandered off, and Desmond said, almost to himself this time, I do not appreciate your neutrality. One last time, Desmond tried shouting with all of his voice to wake the elephant. He tried pushing with all of his strength to get free and tugging with all of his might to get loose. And he tried shouting and pushing and tugging and tugging and pushing and shouting. And when he had just about given up for the last time, he heard another animal pass by through the grass. It was a mouse this time. He called out, and the mouse ran over and introduced himself. He said, "My name is Nelson. What seems to be the problem?" Well, no sooner had Desmond explained the situation than Nelson ran all the way to the other end of that giant elephant body. And he shouted up to those giant elephant ears at the top of that giant elephant head, "Excuse me! It seems you've fallen asleep on my friend's tail in the middle of the meadow. If you could roll over just a few inches in the other direction, he could go free." Well, the elephant heard Nelson's voice way down on the ground, but his little mouse voice was just a bit too quiet. He was just a bit too far away, way down on the ground. And to be honest, the elephant was just a bit too comfortable. He didn't move. So Nelson thought for a moment, and he ran back to Desmond, and he said, "I think I might have an idea. Stay right here." And he ran off into the grass, leaving, well, a kind of confused look on Desmond's face. And just when Desmond was starting to get worried again, he saw Nelson emerge through the grass. But he wasn't alone this time. He had found 3 mouse friends, and each of them had found another 3 mouse friends. The whole group of them ran all the way to the other end of that giant elephant body. One mouse climbed up on the shoulders of another, and another mouse climbed up on her shoulders. And one by one, they formed a whole mouse ladder all the way up the back of that giant elephant head. And then Nelson, slowly and carefully, he climbed up the shoulders of his friends one by one, and at last, he stood right at the opening of that giant elephant ear. And he shouted with all of his voice, "Excuse me! It seems you've fallen asleep on my friend's tail in the middle of the meadow. Roll over. Just a few inches so he can get free." Well, this time, Nelson's voice was too close and too loud to ignore. And so the elephant said, and then he rolled over just a few inches in the other direction. Nelson and his friends climbed back down to the ground, and they met up with Desmond, and the whole group of them spent the rest of that day playing together in the meadow. Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who passed away just a little over a month ago now, once said, "If you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have already taken sides. You've taken sides with the oppressor," he said. And he said, if an elephant ever stands on the tail of a mouse, the mouse will never appreciate your neutrality. Archbishop Tutu believed in a God who, he said, took sides, a God who took sides with the orphan and the widow and the oppressed. As Unitarian Universalists, whether we believe in that God or not, we have covenanted to create a world of justice and equity and compassion. And that means creating a world very different than the one we see around us today. It means imagining a world very different from the one we live in. And it means taking sides for justice, taking sides for equity and compassion to make it real. It means that we come together in communities like this to work together and side with love. May it be so, and may we make it so. Thank you.
May it be so. Thank you, Matt. It's been so long since this congregation has sung the children and youth out. It's been so long since you've been sitting here. I was tearing up just seeing you sitting here. So thank you for joining us this morning, and we're going to sing a rousing round of Trees of the Field. Have a wonderful morning in faith formation. Well, that warms my heart. I don't know about you. Each week, we pause to pay attention to the joys and sorrows that we experienced in the week just past. These can be shared through our book in the lobby of the church, through email at belovedcommunity@allsouls.net, or on the YouTube chat. I invite souls who are online this morning to type your intentions into the chat now, and I invite souls who are in Unity Hall to come light a candle if you wish. Let us begin. Let us prepare our hearts for what is shared. One of us is celebrating for the first time we've sung children out with Trees of the Field, and that is a joy. Kyle shares, "It has been a difficult couple of weeks, and I would appreciate your thoughts as I navigate through this stress. Our thoughts are with you, Kyle. Peter says, good wishes to all you who observe your joys and sorrows. Jesse shares, I, for one, am feeling the strangeness of having things going well in my personal life while there's so much suffering in the world. Barb May, the first in-person service I've seen in years, and it's this one. I'm so full right now. I love you all. George Fargo from Maine. Good morning to all souls. It is nice to see you all. Let us enter into a space of prayer and meditation. In our hearts, we know the gratitudes and the concerns that we each carried into worship today. I know mine. There's illness and pain. There are losses and regrets. There is grace. There is gratitude. There is fear, and there is possibility. Each has a place here in worship. As the song goes, here are my hopes, my dreams, my holy shrine. As we hold tenderly our own personal joys and sorrows, we also bring into our awareness those of others in this community. We move together through this moment in time, leaning on one another in sacred space, in brave space, from Sunday to Sunday. Looking out together at a world that needs what we can give. For we know that other hearts in other lands are beating with hopes and dreams as true and high as ours. Blessed be this complex and sacred communion. Let us say amen. Our reading this morning is Untitled by artist Beth Strano, with additions by Mickey Scott Bay Jones. Together we will create brave space, because there is no such thing as a safe space. We exist in the real world. We all carry scars, and we have all caused wounds. In this space, we seek to turn down the volume of the outside world. We amplify voices that fight to be heard elsewhere. We call each other to more truth and love. We have the right to start somewhere and continue to grow. We have the responsibility to examine what we think we know. We will not be perfect. This space will not be perfect. It will not always be what we wish it to be, but it will be our brave space together. And we will work on it side by side.
I've been thinking a lot about borders recently. Who gets to draw them? Who gets to overrun them? How they are increasingly enforced for those who are the poorest. A couple years ago, someone came from Mexico and came to live with me and my housemates He came seeking asylum, having been tortured in Mexico. But the laws of our country are that if you legally come to this country seeking asylum, you wait in jail, in immigration jail, and you pay thousands of dollars in ransom to be able to enter the country even legally, even when you are fleeing violence and torture. Borders, friends, are made up. And so I'd like to share this song with you that I learned while sitting in front of a detention center in Boston, where we gathered to shut it down for at least a few hours. The song says, Oye mi gente, traemos la fuerza. My friends, listen, we bring the power. Oye mi gente, traemos la fuerza. La libertad es la única bandera. Listen, my people, my condor, my eagle. No human being can ever be illegal. Oye, mi gente, traemos la fuerza. Listen, my people, we bring the power. La libertad es la única bandera. Liberty is the only true flag. Oye, mi gente, traemos la fuerza. La libertad es la única bandera. Listen, my people, my condor, my eagle. No human being can ever be illegal. Oye, mi gente, traemos la fuerza. La libertad es la única bandera. Oye, mi gente, traemos la fuerza. La libertad es la única bandera. Listen, my people, my condor, my eagle. No human being can ever be illegal. Listen, my people, my condor, my eagle. No human being can ever be illegal. Oye, mi gente, traemos la fuerza. La libertad es la única bandera. Oye, mi gente, traemos la fuerza. La libertad es la única bandera. Listen, my people, my condor, my eagle. No human being can ever be illegal. Listen, my people, my condor, my eagle. No human being can ever be illegal. 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 I've spent a lot of time at home these last 2 years. I don't know about you, but it has become more important than ever, for me at least, to start every day with a to-do list, to have at least some modicum of structure to my hours. Every day I begin by writing in illegible script on a little Post-it note in the corner of my desk all the tasks for the day. And to be honest, some of the things remain unchecked at the end of most days. Sometimes most of the things on most days. And one of the things in particular that often goes unchecked is making time for writing. Now, I want to be a writer, someone who makes time for it on the regular, and I'm so dedicated to it that every day I put it on the list. And I'm so dedicated that every day I read books about writing or collect quotes, and I collect prompts and ideas so that when I do write, I will have lots of inspiration. And I'm so dedicated that in particular, every day I work on other pressing commitments and I finish other tasks so that eventually I will have plenty of time to write. I'm so dedicated that surely one of these days I will begin writing. One of my favorite authors, Anne Lamott, talks about this, about how hard it is, in fact, to just sit down every day and put your butt in the chair and write. She says, "The discouraging voices will hound you. This is all piffle," they will say. And they may be right. What you are doing may just be practice, but this is how you're going to get better. Similarly, some of the best writing advice I ever got was from a teacher who once said, "For now, just take a few minutes and don't write. Just write what you would write if you were going to write." In all the years since I got that advice, I haven't written anything since. But I've written a lot about what I would write if I did write. You might call this the practice of practicing, learning how to practice. The problem is that the finished product we might imagine for ourselves can feel just too far from where we begin. The finished draft is too far from the ugly first draft. The person we would like ourselves to be can feel so far from the person we see in the mirror in the morning. And certainly, the world as we would like it to be can feel impossibly far from the world we read about in the headlines every day. The demons of perfectionism stand in the way of good writing, just as they stand in the way of creative risk-taking in general. And this is unfortunate because creating a life for ourselves that doesn't yet exist requires some creative risk-taking. And in fact, showing up, particularly in these uncertain and anxious times of ours, showing up each day just as your best self requires setting aside those discouraging voices that hound us. And even just imagining a world of true justice and equity and compassion, just imagining it means setting aside the voices that will tell you your efforts are just piffle. When the demons of perfectionism show up like this, I try to practice the practicing of showing up for myself and for others. Now, musicians know something about practicing. One of the requirements for all students at Berklee College of Music, where I attended years ago, was 4 semesters of ear training. Now, exactly, you said it. Now, ear training is learning to sight sing music just by reading the notes on the paper or learning to write down the notes just by listening to the song. And when I began at college, I certainly knew that there were people who were capable of this kind of magic, but it seemed like some kind of Harry Potter nonsense to me. Like, you may as well ask me to turn my desk into a toad using the conductor's baton. So on the very first day of ear training class, I remember vividly a sort of nervous silence among all of us new students. Well, silence except for one older gentleman who was quite vocal in his nervousness. There was one student in the class who interrupted the teacher in the very first few minutes of the very first day. He wanted to share that he was worried the class would be too advanced for him, a worry I'm sure nearly all of us shared. But he wanted to make it clear that he knew not a single thing about ear training. The teacher very kindly paused his introductions. He responded saying we had all taken entrance exams and he was sure we were all in the appropriate class. The teacher tried to continue but was interrupted again. Well, the man said, but is this like the very lowest class? Because I need to be in the very lowest class. Now you can see our poor teacher kind of looked around the room a little sheepishly, not really wanting to answer that yes, we were, in fact, a class of the most basic students. Well, he kind of stumbled. It is ear training 101, so it is the lowest. There is, I guess, a class for people that have previously failed this class, but you all are just about the lowest. Now, some of the other students in the class at this point giggled a little bit at this man's anxieties. I was kind of glad to hear, though, that someone was questioning what felt to me like the absurd notion that sight singing even could be taught. I don't know what happened next for that student, but he never came back to our class. Not because anything we did on that first day was actually too hard for him, I'm sure of that. But I think he lacked a belief that improvement was even possible. I kept going, thinking that if generations of students have done this before me, it must be possible somehow, even if I personally can't see the way forward. And I committed to at least practicing the material. I've always remembered this other student, though, who gave up before he started. It's not just that he didn't try to become a great master at ear training. It's that he didn't even try the practicing of it, which always struck me as the real loss. When the discouraging voices hound me, I sometimes think of him, and I remind myself that maybe, for now, the work I'm doing is just practice. But practice is how I'm going to get better. This 2 years of a global pandemic has been a difficult time, to be sure. A time of constant adaptation, a time of the ground shifting constantly beneath us. I imagine that the next year or two, much like the last year or two, will continue to be a time of learning and relearning new ways of being together, of organizing our days differently all over again, of organizing our people differently all over again. This is a time of adaptation, which means it is also a time of imagination. It is a time of imagining new ways of being together, and particularly a time for those in power, which in some ways is all of us, to learn to play a different role and to learn some new tunes together. And particularly for white folks, I think this is a good time to be practicing some new skills and learning to play some new roles in our community as our whole society is being reorganized. We hope for the better. This is a time for listening in some deeper ways we haven't always done so well before. A time for having some hard conversations that we haven't yet practiced enough. Fellow white folks, when you hear people of color making demands on how we might restructure things, how we might imagine things differently as we recreate society all over again, I invite you to practice amplifying those voices that fight to be heard elsewhere. If you inherited wealth that was accumulated in a time of systematic racial segregation, which is true of all wealth in this country, now is a time to practice giving it away. It isn't yours. And if your muscle memory has been to call the police when things go wrong, now is a time for us to teach each other some new skills, some new ways of being, some new ways of finding safety and accountability. I don't say this because I will all of a sudden do all of these things, but I will practice the doing of them. Musicians know as well as anyone that muscle memory is very real. We know that consistent practicing changes the very structure of our brains, rewiring our circuitry, forging new connections and totally new possibilities. No one is born a musician. Musicians are just the ones who learned how to practice. Even songbirds need elder birds to sing to them and teach them their tunes. Practice doesn't make music perfect, but it makes music possible. So let us practice the practicing together, showing up for ourselves and others to imagine and build that new world of justice and equity and compassion, just as we are reorganizing things all over again. Practice won't make the world perfect, but it makes a better world possible. Someday I want to be a true expert in justice and compassion. Someday I want to be well practiced at creating that brave space from our reading, even when there's no such thing as safe space. Someday I want to be masterful at amplifying the voices that fight to be heard elsewhere, and I want to be skillful at speaking more truth and love. Someday I want to be part of transforming our so-called justice system that has hurt so many so deeply. Someday I want to be part of building a world without violent borders. Someday I want to be part of transforming an energy sector that is working overtime to overheat our planet. These are daunting tasks, to be sure. And on most days, learning to transcribe a symphony by ear seems more doable than any one of them. But that's okay, because for now, I don't have to do all of those things. I just need to practice doing what I would do if I were doing them. So, beloveds, don't promise to be your best self today. Just be the person you would be if you were practicing being your best self. Don't try to rebuild a new world in the image of love this week. Just practice doing what you would do if you had committed to such things. You have the right to start somewhere and continue to grow. We all have the responsibility to practice together, the responsibility to examine what we think we know. And so let us start together, let us grow together, and let us practice together. May it be so, and may we make it so. Our closing hymn was written by Sarah Lynch Thomason, a climate justice activist in Appalachia. This song, I think, like the best music, and perhaps like the best faith communities, calls us not to turn away from difficult things, not to ignore the multiple crises of our time, but to look at them directly, to name them honestly, and to move forward to address them together. I invite you to rise in body or spirit and join together in singing as you get the hang of it. It goes like this. There are more waters rising, this I know, this I know. There are more waters rising, this I know. There are more waters rising, they will find their way to me. There are more waters rising, this I know, this I know. There are more waters rising, this I know. Can we try that? There are more waters rising, this I know, this I know. There are more waters rising, this I know. There are more waters rising, they will find their way to me. There are more waters rising, this I know, this I know. There are more waters rising, this I know. Sounds good. There are more fires burning. There are more fires burning, this I know, this I know. There are more fires burning, this I know. There are more fires burning, they will find their way to me. There are more fires burning, this I know, this I know. There are more fires burning, this I know. More mountains falling. There are more mountains falling, this I know, this I know. There are more mountains falling, this I know. There are more mountains falling, they will find their way to me. There are more mountains falling, this I know, this I know. There are more mountains falling, this I know. I will wade through the water. I will wade through the waters, this I know, this I know. I will wade through the waters, this I know. I will wade through the waters when they find their way to me. I will wade through the waters, this I know, this I know. I will wade through the waters, this I know. I will walk through the fire. I will walk through the fire, this I know, this I know. I will walk through the fire, this I know. I will walk through the fires when they find their way to me. I will walk through the fires, this I know, this I know. I will walk through the fires, this I know. I will rebuild the mountains, this I know, this I know. I will rebuild the mountains, this I know. I will rebuild the mountains when they find their way to me. I will rebuild the mountains, this I know, this I know. I will rebuild the mountains, this I know. There are more waters, there are more waters rising, this I know, this I know. There are more waters rising, this I know. There are more waters rising, they will find their way to me. There are more waters rising, this I know, this I know. There are more waters rising, this I know. Beloveds, you have the right to start somewhere and continue to grow. Let us grow together. Let us learn together, and let us practice together, imagining and together building that world of justice, equity, and compassion. Go in peace, go in love, and go and be blessed as you are a blessing to others.
Amen. Thank you, Matt. Thank you so much. To bring to us on multiple levels the tools and the suggestions to not be paralyzed, to practice as if we're doing the thing we think we might someday do. I feel just a little more ready than I did when I walked in here. I thank you, Matt. And Matt's going to extinguish our chalice. Please speak with me the words in our order of worship. The service has ended, but our work is not yet done. May our spirits be renewed and our purpose be resolved as we meet the challenges of the week. The flame is extinguished until once again ignited by the strength of our communion. And as we do each week, let us reach out to the community. And Matt, we invite you to send us forth.
Go in peace, beloveds. Go with love and go and be blessed as you are blessing to others. Go forth practicing. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Please be seated. Thank you, Matt. So a few announcements. First, be aware that Matt's book is in the back of right where Jesse is standing, available for purchase. Desmond Gets Free. As always, we thank you for your financial support of All Souls through online giving or through a check in the mail or the baskets on your way out. And this week's stewardship update is that $103,507.35 has been pledged by 30 households. And if you've not yet submitted your pledge, we ask that you do so. Emmy Franklin, who's part of the stewardship team, is here today, and she wants you to know that she can field any questions that you may have. Next Sunday, March 6th, I'll be preaching, and Reverend Carolyn will be with me here and with us. I know you'll join me in joyfully welcoming her back from her mini sabbatical. Today, the children and youth are finishing their session with a Black Lives Matter witness outside. So they'll be heading to the Peace Garden for their snack, and please meet them there. Online coffee hour starts now. You can look for the link in your weekly newsletter. May you go lifted up. See you next time. Thank you.